So let's shift gears here and move on to the offensive side of the football. This one will be quick because this is not as much of a competition, if you will. I think the offense is pretty much shaken out, where if you look at the defense, I think there's spots at safety, there's spots at linebacker, and there's spots obviously at that defensive tackle number 2 spot on as far as guys who could play more. On offense, it's pretty much shaped up how it's going to be. But for me, the number 1 guy, and by the way, these aren't ranked for who is going to play the most or anything like that. This is just guessing because we're at the point in the offseason where there's absolutely nothing to talk about. So I just got guys down on the list here. But Marquise Goodwin, I've been talking about Goodwin since we signed him. He's going to play more than people think. And seeing the clips coming out of camp and his connection with Deshaun Watson and his ability to stretch the field, even at his age, he still has it. It's clear to see. And I'm not trying to overreact to camp tape, but the Browns desperately need to have guys with speed, and we now have 2 of them for sure that we could count on. One being Elijah Moore, who's obviously going to be a starter, but don't sleep on Marquise Goodwin to get valuable playing time and a lot of minutes on this offense. Think of him as a Jarvis Landry type veteran receiver who you can rely on, but instead of, with Landry, he was kind of your contested catch receiver, right? He's going to catch the ball, maybe not take it to the house, but he's got decent hands. Think of it more as Marquise Goodwin as your reliable vet to hit deep is kind of what I'm looking at for Goodwin. And I think at this point in his career, he still brings you more than Landry did in his last year here in Cleveland. So I'm absolutely pumped. I'm excited to see what Marquise Goodwin does. I think this is a guy who you could see extended and kept on this roster in the wide receiver room another year, depending on how everything shakes out. I don't know for sure, but what I mean when I tell you that is I think he is going to have a much bigger impact than a lot of people think. So there's that with Marquise Goodwin. I've talked about him enough, but there's a little bit more for you. Next up, this one's interesting. James Hudson. So Jedrick Wills is always hurt, right? DeJuan Jones is going to be nowhere near ready to step in and start. Hudson drastically improved from year 1 to year 2, and now going into year 3, after getting a little bit of playing time, somebody's bound to get hurt on that offensive line. And James Hudson can slide in and play guard. James Hudson can be a swing tackle for you. So I could keep this one quick. I think he is going to see some playing time this season, whether if it be injury or whatnot. And also, the packages that Kevin Stefanski runs, I know we're going to be more of a passing team now, but you can't tell me you get down to the goal line, Kevin doesn't want to do that again, where you put James Hudson and just have him pull across the line and wreck some poor defender. I think he's gonna play some this year, and I'll be honest with you. There's no reason for me to lie here. Couldn't really think anybody else, so that's why I had James Hudson on this list as far as guys who you're not really probably thinking of that could play more. So the next one, I'll keep this really fast because it's very simple. Jordan Akins, kind of the same thing with Goodwin. Veteran guy at a different position. Harrison Bryant has struggled, and he might not make the team. If he does, I think he's the 3rd tight end at this point. Akins has had a really good relationship and connection with Deshaun Watson so far throughout both of their careers. When they were in Houston playing for the Texans together, connected a lot. Put up his best stats. So even at that tight end 2 position, I think Jordan Akins is still going to get the ball quite a bit and play, some significant time for this Cleveland Browns offense, trying to stretch the field. So I think that's a no-brainer for me. The next one, these next 2, we're going to end off on a hot note here. Let's start with this one. Demetric Felton, right? And I don't even know how much I believe this, to be honest with you. But until the Browns sign a third running back, Felton is on this team. And yes, if a running back goes down, you could always sign one off the street. I want the Browns to sign Robinson. I think that would be a perfect fit. But till that day happens, I can only tell you what I know. And what I know is the guys who are still on this team right now. I think Felton could play a little bit of what you've seen the Browns do with Elijah Moore a little bit, where he's kind of lined up in the backfield, but also been a receiver. I could see us doing that stuff with Felton. I don't think Demetric Felton is talentless. I think he brings you some sort of valuability, if you want to call it that. That's probably not a word, but I think he is a little bit valuable. It's just a matter of putting him in the right role. But I don't want him on special teams. I don't want him on kick return, punt return. It was a heart attack every time that ball was up in the air and you saw Demetric Felton back there to catch it, because for whatever reason, he was just not the guy for the job. But as we stand today, he is still on this team, and the Browns do not have a third running back, aside from the UDFA signing, but I'm not going to really count that. And especially because Felton was drafted by Andrew Berry, and we know how Andrew Berry is with these draft picks. So I'm going to leave Demetric Felton on this list. I'm going to say if he makes the team, he does play some, and that might surprise some people. But in a more heavy passing offense than we're used to, you have a guy like Demetric Felton who can be a weapon out of the backfield. I think he could get some playing time if he makes the team. But that's a big if. The next guy, really out of left field, I mentioned him a little bit, I think, in the last video. Jaelon Darden. This guy is very intriguing because I've liked Darden, since before he was even drafted. He's a very good player. He's a very good player. How he ended up on the Browns, I don't know. But he's fast, he's shifty, and again, in an offense where you're going to pass more, I think he could make the team. I really do think he could make the team over a guy like a Jakeem Grant now because of the rule change in the NFL for kick returns. I think you're going to see a guy who has shown promise. And again, I've mentioned this before, the clips coming out of camp, Darden is one of these guys who is in the highlights, right? Who was in the highlights. And as OTAs come and everything like that, or maybe, I don't know, whatever the order, whatever camp is next, right? Darden is a guy to pay attention to because so far, so good. So far, he's been really good. And the bottom of this receiver room, I think there is going to be a competition there, right, for Jakeem Grant's spot, because you're looking at Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones, for sure, as your top three. Cedric Tillman, David Bell, and then what are you looking at? Who kind of shapes up the back half of the wide receiver room? I think that Jaelon Darden is a guy to pay attention to. And again, if he's already got a little bit of connection with Deshaun Watson, who knows? Wouldn't hurt.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Dawgs Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Twitter at the Dawgs Podcast. Get your thoughts on the show at thedawgspodcast.com.